Taoiseach, I wish to raise the issue of the sale of state-owned assets by the IBRC and the inquiry into the sale of those, the difficulties and the obstacles that have now been identified by the chairman of the inquiry and as revealed in the Sunday Business Post via a leak of some sort. And the issues are very serious, and you will recall the background to them, Taoiseach, and of course the sale of SiteServe to a combined-owned company at a loss of 119 million to the taxpayer was the prime catalyst for the initiation of this inquiry into that deal and other deals that subsequently it emerged that senior civil servants in the Department of Finance had concerns with. It's fair to say the government were dragged kicking and screaming to this stage to establish an inquiry. There was a reluctance and a refusal indeed to answer parliamentary questions. The senior concerns of the Department of Finance officials were forced through freedom of information requests, and the doggedness and tenacity of Deputy Murphy is to be commended in that regard. But all along, Taoiseach, there was that reluctance. And of course the KPMG, the company that advised on the sale of SiteServe originally, were asked by the then Minister for Finance, or the Minister for Finance, to actually conduct the inquiry, incredibly as that now seems. Eventually, with all of the opposition, he capitulated, he handed it over to you. You appointed Judge Daniel O'Keefe. A month later, Judge O'Keefe has to withdraw for personal reasons, and Judge Brian Cregan is appointed to the chair. And this week, we now learn that on Friday or Thursday, you were alerted that there were major obstacles, and today the judge is saying to the Cabinet he cannot proceed with this inquiry. So, Taoiseach, it's a litany of incompetence at best, maybe a degree of convenience as well. The government had thought they might have parked all the controversies some time ago, but it's extraordinary the degree to which it seems impossible to get any information or any inquiry going in relation to the sale of SiteServe and other issues. So, Taoiseach, are you saying that government officials did not know about any of this until this week? Because in August the 22nd, in the Irish Times, there's an article by Cliff Taylor flagging concerns of this kind and indicating that government officials are confident that any legal concerns could be overcome to allow the formal handover of documentation to get underway in earnest. And it actually identifies issues at that time. And also we learn that the Department of Justice officials are confirming to the Irish Examiner yesterday, for example, this morning's Examiner, that they had taken legal advice and that they had not waived its rights in relation to the release of documents. Now, this is the Department of Justice. Department of Finance officials, Department of Finance officials. So, Taoiseach, if finance officials are taking legal advice on this very issue and are refusing to waive their rights in relation to the release of documents, how is it that the Minister of Finance doesn't know anything about this until Thursday or Friday, and you know nothing about it until Thursday or Friday? And is it credible, Taoiseach, that the Attorney General didn't flag this issue to the Cabinet in advance of the establishment of the Commission of Investigation? And would you now undertake to publish the Attorney General's advices that were given to government prior to the establishment of the Commission itself?
Taoiseach. Thank you, Deputy Martin. You've outlined the background to this particular issue. I start by saying that I don't know of anybody in the House here who doesn't want this matter dealt with thoroughly, comprehensively, transparently, and in an absolutely accountable way in the public interest. So that's my opening position. The Department of the Taoiseach is the receiving department here for reports from Justice Cregan in respect of this matter. Obviously, the discussions that would have taken place when Justice O'Keefe was dealing with this, because he was beginning to handle it at that stage and then had to retire because of personal reasons, and as you pointed out, Justice Cregan has now taken over. I might say that for the information of the House, that the Government at its Cabinet meeting today reaffirmed its commitment to ensuring that there be a full and independent investigation of the issues that were raised in relation to the IBRC matter and the transactions therein. The Attorney General briefed the Government on a number of legal issues and potential options that are open to ensure that this can actually be achieved. And the Government noted that a number of significant legal issues arise which need consideration. I might set out for members of the House briefly the sequence of events here. On the 9th of June, following consultation by the Minister of Finance with the opposition parties, the Government approved the draft order establishing the Commission into certain matters of significant public concern concerning transactions entered into by IBRC. The draft order was then laid before both houses of the Oireachtas and approved following debate in both houses. Subsequently, on the 15th of June, the Government established the Commission. Following the resignation of Justice O'Keefe for personal reasons, Justice Cregan was appointed as Chair of the Commission on the 9th of July. I was designated as the responsible minister under the Act, so the judge sends his formal reports to me, and his work is funded through the vote of my department. He is, of course, completely independent in the conduct of his investigation. Now, last Thursday, November the 5th, Judge Cregan and his legal team met at his request with officials from my department and the Office of the Attorney-General. And at that meeting, Ceann Comhairle, he outlined legal issues that he had considered in relation to the use of documents which were either confidential or subject to legal privilege, and stated that he now made a determination in that regard. The officials asked that his position be outlined urgently in writing to me as the responsible minister under the Commissions of Investigation Act. The determination by the judge was not given to my department at that meeting, although it was sent by Judge Cregan to the Department of Finance later that day, and therefore has been available to the Attorney-General for her consideration of the matter. I received a letter from Judge Cregan the following day, last Friday, November the 6th. This letter refers to the determination of the judge and the Commission in relation to issues of confidentiality and privilege, which means that, in the words of the letter, it is not in a position to proceed with its investigation into any of the relevant write-off transactions. End of quotation. The letter also states, Ceann Comhairle, that the Commission is in the process of preparing an interim report to me as a specified minister, which will outline the work of the Commission to date, the issues which have arisen, and to seek an extension of time for the completion of the work of the Commission. The interim report can only be finalised after the Commission has consulted with any person who is identified in or identifiable from the draft report. On receipt of that letter, Ceann Comhairle, from Judge Cregan, I immediately requested advice from the Attorney-General on the implications of this determination and the legal options that are now open to ensure that the House here can have an investigation which is fully transparent and accountable, and that can be completed in an effective and a timely manner. I will arrange to have the judge's letter published today. The Government was informed this morning that Judge Cregan has now decided to publish his determination, both in respect of the issue of confidentiality in regard to the Special Liquidator and the Department of Finance. I understand that this has now been done, and I welcome the judge's decision to publish so that all concerned can debate the issues involved in an absolutely transparent fashion. The Government was also informed this morning of a request from Judge Cregan that it would be preferable for the Government to receive his interim report to Ceann Comhairle before deciding on the course of action that it should take. This is also the view of the Attorney-General, who cannot, in fairness, give formal legal advices to the Cabinet in the absence of the Judge's interim report. I understand that that should be available shortly as the document and as the consultations were underway and dealt with on Friday last, as I understand. So, given the importance of the issue, the question of confidentiality and legal professional privilege, this raises extensive legal issues which have been considered in detail by the Commission over the last number of months. And given the importance of that at Ceann Comhairle, and as the terms of reference for the Commission were prepared following consultation with the opposition parties, and the order establishing the Commission was approved by the Houses of the Oireachtas, I believe that the questions that have now arisen should be considered by all the parties and the members in the House before a decision is made on what is the best way to proceed. So I also hope, finally, Ceann Comhairle, that Judge Cregan will be in a position to submit his interim report to me formally as the receiving minister at the earliest possible date, and I will then commit to publishing that in accordance with the law, and also to discussing it with members of the opposition and in the House here, in order that we can identify what needs to be done following his judicial determination and move on to achieve the ambition of accountable, transparent analysis of all the transactions where there was in excess of a 10 million write-off.
Taoiseach, you didn't answer any of the questions I asked. Not one. I asked a very simple question, Taoiseach. Were government officials, are you saying government officials were not aware of any of this until this week? And why are Department of Finance officials confirming that the Minister of Finance and the Department of Finance have refused to waive its rights in relation to the release of documents? Can you please explain why Finance are doing that? It's confirmed by its officials yesterday. And in that very decision, clearly being aware that this was an issue for some time, the former Chairman Alan Dukes is confirming that he discussed it with the Chairman of the investigation 2 months ago. There was a published article in the Irish Times on August the 22nd relating to these issues. Did the Attorney General flag this issue with you at any stage, Taoiseach? Either prior to the establishment of the Commission of Investigation in her advices to government, and there must have been advices at that stage, will you now publish those advices? Because it seems incredible, it doesn't seem credible, that these substantive issues were not raised with the government and with you in advance of setting up the Commission of Investigation. That would seem to have been a major omission. But fundamentally, Taoiseach, are you saying, and are you saying to me categorically that no officials in either the Department of Finance or in your department or elsewhere were aware of this issue prior to this week?
Thank you.
Can you please clarify that? And secondly, why have Finance refused to waive its rights? Because we have an extraordinary situation, it seems, from the evidence of Mr. Dukes, that KPMG, who was a state-appointed liquidator to the IBRC, is claiming privilege over these documents, and the Department of Finances into the activities of the State Bank handling assets belonging to the Irish people and involving write-offs concerning the Irish people. And the public generally will be looking at this and saying, you know what, when it comes to the powerful and the wealthy, you never really go too far with the inquiries. That's a problem, Taoiseach, in terms of the general public's perception of how obstacle after obstacle can be put in the way of getting to some basic truths about very basic issues that were raised and that were first seriously alerted to the public and to you and to the Minister of Finance by senior civil servants in the Department of Finance. Not a media hype, as some have suggested, but by senior civil servants in the Department of Finance who flagged real concerns to Minister Noonan way back on the sale of SiteServe and the sale of other assets. But the government chose to do nothing about those concerns until they were forced out into the open through freedom of information requests. That's the sad reality, Taoiseach. You are dragged kicking and screaming to where we are today. And again, you're empty-handed in terms of any succour for the general public and their wish to know what went on.
Taoiseach? Well, I make the point to you, as I did before, that your own party was very forthright in welcoming the setting up of the Commission of Investigation into certain matters relating to IBRC and obviously made the point that the establishment of the statutory investigation was a rare victory for our parliamentary democracy. Everybody, despite their initial political comments, welcomed the fact that the Commission of Investigation was being set up. Now, the Department of the Taoiseach is the receiving department for the report or reports that will come from Justice Cregan. The Department of Finance are party to the investigation by the Commission into this matter. So, of course, in respect of the work of the Commission to date, which will be outlined in the interim report from Justice Cregan, obviously he will outline the contacts and the consultations that he would have had with all interested parties, including the Department of Finance. Well, they are a party to the investigation being conducted by the Commission.
Sorry. Jeez, we're 7 minutes over the time.
You're going a little too far, Deputy Martin. The point is that the Department of Finance are a part of the investigation by the Commission into the sale of the assets in respect of IBRC. Therefore, the justice in moving through the process would have to be in contact with interested parties. He has now made a determination following that process that he cannot go any further because of the issues of confidentiality.
That doesn't answer my question. That means, are you saying
Mr. Noonan commented the other day that all of the requests that were made of the Department of Finance in regard to this matter were sent in unredacted form to the Commission when they were requested. And obviously, as has happened on the vast majority of other cases, they carry a warning in respect of confidentiality. I would say, Deputy Martin, that in the past, in the conduct of a number of commissions, the question of confidentiality was overruled in the public interest, which we want here. But no justice in the past has equated the question of confidentiality with that of privilege. And the act drawn up in 2004. The act drawn up by the late Attorney General, drafted the act, didn't distinguish between the question of confidentiality and privilege. Now, in the determination published on the Commission's website, Justice Cregan has made a number of observations. Now, he has made a request this morning that the Cabinet would not take a course of action until the interim report is received from him, and I respect that. But I would say that work is already underway in respect of the possibilities of options that need to be followed here by the Office of the Attorney General. And let me repeat again that it is the single determination of the government to see.
Yes to my question.
Sorry, please.
It was the single.
I have to ask.
That's a straight question. Did they know before last week or not?
Sorry.